All right, so welcome to the inaugural podcast, video series, whatever you want to call it, of essentially SMB marketing or SMB business advice from people that actually know what the hell they're talking about. I have a tendency to not interview people or not be friends with people who don't actually are results oriented in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy to have Atsushi Yasuda here. A lot of people just call him AY. I'll call him AY for the purposes of this video. And we're going to talk about scaling businesses, scaling SMB businesses. Typically you have to be a mil and above for this to actually be relevant to you. But we're just going to be talking about scaling, how to build engines, what the biggest obstacles are for small businesses to actually get from that $1 to $3 million value, from $10 to $30 million. There's different obstacles along the way. AY comes from a long history of working in some pretty high executive roles at a lot of companies over his 20, 30-year career.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, 30 years, man.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
He's been in multiple VP roles, global services, project leadership, professional services, client services at a lot of global agencies, a lot of global companies. Recently, he's been the managing director and executive vice president of customer experience at Mass Engines. And I could go on for days, but I'll just link his LinkedIn profile above. I think for LinkedIn it's above rather than below. Just find it. So the reason why I brought AY today is because I like to call him the 3X guy, because he's taken a lot of companies from 1 mil to 3 mil over a very short time span, and he actually has fucking done it. This ain't no marketing goddamn play. He's actually fucking done it. He's been in multiple roles where he's been able to really look at the data, look at the metrics, and look at the financials and take companies to where they actually need to be. So he knows what the hell he's talking about. This ain't no gray hair factor. Just putting it out there. But he knows what the hell he's talking about. That's why I'm good friends with him. That's why I've known him for, the past year now. Something like that. So we're going to get right into it. AY, first off, thanks for coming.
Hey.
I appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. I think the biggest question that I got to ask you is, over all these companies that you've actually worked for, or have helped to grow, scaling is typically an issue for almost every single company out there. What is the biggest problem that you see when it comes to getting to that level of scaling?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. But firstly, I think we have to be clear is that it doesn't matter how big your company is. It doesn't matter what you sell. It doesn't matter how you sell it. Every company has a challenge, and you have to deal with these challenges each and every day. But, and based on my experience, there's a couple of different themes that comes through that surface. And, the first one is really about focus, right? It's the ability to kind of cut through the noise, to kind of really just break it down into what are the priority activities that I need to kind of figure out, I need to address. And I think that's one of the key things, because, like you think about it, right? Like, as a startup, when you think about a startup culture, it's not a whole lot different than what you would expect. It's chaos. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen, and there's usually not enough time in the day to get all of this stuff done. And so you have to kind of, so as a founder, as the leads within a company, you need to kind of figure out to kind of set the charge to be able to focus on the right things. And, for me, it's all about lines and lamps. It's really about trying to figure out which activities needs to take priority over others, and then being able to commit to that. And I think that's really one of the things that's very difficult, especially for those founders that don't have that level of experience quite yet. I guess the other thing is, this is a great lesson that I've learned. It's about decision making. I like to call it, I like to think of it as decision making for the realities of today. It is really about, and a lot of times you know what the right answer is, but it's dependent on the circumstance. So a right answer that may be, kind of this future state of your business may not necessarily be the right decision today. So it's really about kind of, again, cutting through all of that to figure out, hey, I know what the right decision is, but given my circumstances, whether it's it's cash flow, it's revenue, it's clients, it's marketing, it's sales, what have you, you're going to need to kind of commit to what the correct direction is, what the right direction is. And I guess lastly, you know it's about change. It's about accepting and embracing that level of change, because that's probably one of the best things, the most exciting things about working with startups is the level of change that a company goes through over a very short period of time, right? Sometimes it happens really quickly, and they typically make the news in terms of their explosive growth. But sometimes it feels like a freight train, right? It's like you can hear it, you can smell it, and it's damn well coming your way. And so for founders, it really is about kind of making sure that you accept the reality that change is constant. Because if you're status quo, man, right, you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, and that really can kind of impede your ability to continue to grow and scale. But I think those are kind of the themes that I've kind of come across time over time in working with founders, especially those that don't have the level of experience, and which is great because you're looking at things through a fresh set of eyes. But they are things that will, that can kind of significantly impact your ability to kind of scale out your business.
Yeah. So I know from a marketing perspective, like the biggest problem that I feel a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders hit is that they're inundated with all these like big companies on like Facebook or in the news or something saying like, how to go from 1,000 to like 10,000 followers or something. When in actuality, especially in the B2B space, I don't know, like when someone says, oh, like how do I get to 10,000 followers? Going to get me to 10,000 followers, 100,000 followers. I'm like, is that really your fucking issue right now?
Yeah.
Like I don't, like in the B2B space, I don't think you really need an Instagram right now. Plus, if you were to have an Instagram, wouldn't you rather have like 400 followers who are all paying customers rather than 10,000 people or 100,000 people will never pay you a goddamn dime, right? So it's like, it's all these priorities and strategies that like I feel like the founders, they just like read something and feel like they need to do it.
And I think you can get caught up in that hype, right?
Yeah.
And there's no silver bullet. There is no magic formula that says this is how you're going to scale and build out a startup. I wish there were, right? At least, my kind of purview of the world is that hasn't been developed quite yet.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is about really kind of understanding your own capabilities, understand what your kind of constraints are, and then being able to just simply leverage that. You know what? Everybody talks a good game. Honestly, everybody talks a good game, but you got to run your own race, right? Like it really is about kind of staying true to what your vision is, what your intent was to kind of take this on, to kind of look to build and scale a startup. And if you're talking about $1 million kind of startup, you're talking about a company that has more than likely has proven itself out, has proven the concept, the product, the service, what the offering, and has customers, has paying customers, has clients, has a way to reach that audience. And it's simply now about what's the next, how do I level up? How do I get to the next level of scale and growth? And I think that's where it introduces a different set of challenges than being able to just simply stand up a startup.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I have $1 million company.
Yeah.
Let's say I sell like a tech product.
Yeah.
And I bring you on and I tell you, look, AY, I need you to fucking take me to 3 mil. I am stuck. I've been at a mill for the past 5 years. What would be your step-by-step process to help me get there?
Yeah, you know what? Not to kind of come off sounding like some sort of a freaking Dr. Ho infomercial.
Just fucking say it.
But I do offer. I have a specific business enablement program that's tailored for startups that are of that profile. You have revenue, you have customers, you have a product and service offering that you've proven out, and you're now looking to kind of level up. And so for me, I start with, let's get an it's not rocket science. You start with at the 30,000 foot view, right? And to really understand, okay, what's the business? What's the core? What is it that makes you unique? What is it that is going to help you kind of get to that next level? And it starts with understanding, that current state. Where are you today? And then really working with the founders and the champions within the company to be able to say, okay, what's your aspiration? What's your vision? Not 6 months from today or even 12 months from today, but what's your ultimate vision? Like, are you looking to be, a lifestyle brand at 100 million? Like, what is it that you're trying to target? Because that really sets the kind of the current state and the future state. But then really you got to bring it back to kind of, I'm going to say, the realities of, let's break it down. What is feasible, what's realistic, and what's going to provide that stretch over the next 12-month period. So I really work in these kind of 12-month sprints to be able to define and help them define what are the core objectives, right? We're talking about OKRs. It's a proven model. It's been, Andy Grove kind of instituted it within Intel, decades ago. But it's really a concept that's very simple, but yet it's very kind of difficult to kind of successfully implement within organizations. But the framework makes total sense regardless of the size of your business, right? It's really about setting what are the core objectives that you want to accomplish over the next period. And I kind of said 12 months because I think that gives you enough of a runway. But then you got to break it down into, in order for me to meet these objectives, what are the key results? What are the measurable results that I need to be able to achieve in order to kind of track to that? And so I go through a discovery workshop to be able to kind of uncover that, to really break it down. And so, it comes back to focus. If you kind of wrote down 15 objectives for the next 12 months, I can guarantee you're not going to accomplish that. So you need to break it down into something that's more reasonable, 2 to 3. What are the 2 to 3 core objectives that you want to accomplish over the next 12 months? And then you start to set your milestones, right? You set your target. And how do we kind of measure that progress? How do we measure that we're tracking to that? And so it is about kind of collaborating and helping founders stretch their vision to be able to kind of push themselves beyond where they're comfortable to be able to kind of set those goals. And then it is really about kind of mentorship and coaching. I think that's one of the things that I really am keen to provide and work with founders is to be able to prepare them for how do you lead and manage a bigger enterprise, a bigger organization, because you're going to be a larger company 12 months from today. So let's make sure you're prepared. So those are kind of at the highest level. That's kind of the concept, the framework in which I have my conversations. I drive towards results. And so at the end of the day, if I've done my job correctly and I've really worked and partnered with the founders, we will have accomplished those objectives.
So let's take out so the founders will likely have their own vision of where they want to be, a lifestyle company, a multi-billion-dollar company. But let's say their visions are skewed, right? Like
between founders, you mean?
Yeah, well, between founders, like if it's a single founder, if it's co-founders, whatever it may be, like they likely have come to an agreement on the top 3 visions that they want to achieve or top 3 goals. But it might be skewed because you're saying that they're clearly inexperienced or they just don't know enough to make those visions. So from your perspective working with all these companies, let's say if you were to pinpoint the top 3 like biggest problems in a very concise manner that you consistently face across every founder you've talked to, what would those top 3 be?
That's great. I think the first one is like it comes back to what I had said earlier. It's you get into this when you realize some success, right? You can become very complacent and say, hey, it should be just more of the same. And to scale out a business, it's more than that. It's not more of the same, because to manage a $1 million business is vastly different than managing a $5 million business or a $10 million business. And so it really is kind of getting people outside of this comfort of, hey, we've made it, we've arrived, to continue to push them to kind of accept that change, and in order for them to kind of truly realize their goals, right? And I guess this is where my experience comes into play, is that you only know what you know, right? Founders can't see beyond kind of their own experience, and that's just human nature, right? And so, we've seen this time and time again where the solution magically happens to be something that you've done in the past. Well, that may work sometimes, but a lot of times that isn't the case. You have to kind of expand and extend yourself to be able to kind of come up with the ideal or the optimal solution. And so it really is about kind of being able to kind of accept that change is inevitable, and change is actually the key motivator and driver of being able to scale out your business.
Like top three. Just name concisely top three.
And I would say the focus, the reliance on a small group of clients, I would say that's often prevalent within a small organization, because you land the kind of the whale, and you kind of want to kind of just ride its coattails forever. But we all know a customer doesn't, you don't have, or it's rare to have a customer for life, right? There's a typical shelf life that a customer has before they kind of wanted to explore other options and so on. So this reliance on a small set of clients as your main revenue source can be problematic. It's great because if you look at it from a top line revenue perspective, it looks great. Like you continue to grow and progress. But if it's just a matter of growing one client, then you're introducing a level of risk to your startup that you need to make sure you manage. And it is about, and I guess the other thing is really, and one of the lessons I've learned recently is that, like especially if you're running a services business, something that relies on the capabilities of your people, you got to kind of make sure that you work to define that culture, because that's what's going to prove to be the measuring stick in which you do your hires. And because if you, as a small startup, every hire matters. Every decision you make in terms of who you bring into the business gets amplified, it's magnified in terms of the implications. A great hire is going to accelerate you far more than just a regular kind of hire. And conversely, if you make one bad decision in terms of your hire, they prove to be toxic within the office and so on. That can be, that has significant implications as well. So it is about kind of making sure you kind of manage the soft stuff as well as you're looking to grow, and not lose sight of that. And you know what, I'd be the first to say, you can manage a business by the numbers, but it's very difficult to kind of put metrics around culture and so on. And so I think it's really is something that is kind of dictated and influenced by the founders. What kind of environment do they want to establish within their office? And so to me, as much as it feels pretty soft and fluffy, it is material in terms of your ability to kind of scale. I would say those are probably the kind of the two things. And then it's just, I would say the last thing is really accept the limitations of your organization based on your experience. Like to be open to kind of seek advice, to kind of seek different examples. There's obviously tons of sources of information that's available. And so kind of embrace that for sure. Like you had said earlier, Andrew, is that sometimes you have to accept it with a grain of salt, and you have to kind of make sure that it's applicable. But really, the more information that you can kind of absorb, the better informed you're going to be to make those decisions. To me, those are kind of the fundamentals to be able to kind of help drive your business.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. The top three that you've mentioned in a very concise manner is one, the reliance on a small group of clients.
Yeah.
Two, as a result of that, is complacency, because you feel like you fucking made it, but you really haven't. Because if you're not going to scale off a small group of clients, you need to consistently keep selling. And the third thing is, this is a huge one, and I totally agree with you on this, is accept the limitations of your organization based on your own experience, hence be open to consultants, hence be open to whatever the gray-haired folks out there. Not trying to knock you. But I think those are, and at the end of the day, if we were to categorize all of this into one big thing, it's, and at least from my experience, and I feel from your experience as well, is the founders, right? It's literally your founders. It's literally your own limitation, your own mindset of just trying to get over that hurdle. And it's sometimes easier, and I know from my experience, it's sometimes easier to just hire someone who's a lot smarter than you, a lot more experience than you in this, so you don't make those mistakes, and you can scale in a shorter amount of time.
Right. Yeah, and that's the trick, right? It's that it's nobody's doubting your capabilities. Like as a founder, your mentality, your passion, your motivation, your drive is not in question. But it really is about how do I get to my ultimate vision as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And there's no one's suggesting that you can't get there on your own, but if you can kind of get counsel from those that have been there, done that, and kind of have that level of experience that's going to augment your own capabilities, you're going to be able to avoid the pitfalls. You're going to be able to kind of make better decisions based on a broader level of knowledge or a base of knowledge. And I think that's really what I'm suggesting is that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, right? It's actually pretty smart to be able to sit there and recognize what your own limitations are, and then to be able to find resources to be able to kind of augment that, because that's really going to help you grow.
What's interesting is that this kind of relates to I think it was an HBR article. Someone told me about this, and I looked it up. And the most successful entrepreneurs, everyone thinks is in like their 20s and 30s, because that's all we fucking hear about, right? Yeah. So like the Facebook founder, the LinkedIn founders, like 20s, early 30s, whatever it may be, have built amazing products. But in actuality, the average age, I think it was about 35 to 40, and of successful entrepreneurs, and success by whatever, I think it's by financial terms more than anything. But that kind of blew my mind, because it's like, experience does play a huge part in all this, and I don't think it's the experience, it's the mistakes that you make in that experience, right? You fuck up enough times, you're not going to make that same fuck up again.
Yeah, it's the lessons learned, right? Yeah. It's not about saying, oh, look at me, I was successful yesterday, so therefore I'm successful today. No, it's about, oh shit, I stumbled out of the gate, and here's the reasons why. I understand myself better, I understand why it happened, and then you avoid it, or you better manage it the next iteration, right? And so there is definitely something to be said for kind of being able to leverage those lessons, right? Whether they're your own or somebody, your co-founder, or whoever you have within your pool of kind of experts and SMEs. But it really is about kind of being able to kind of dodge some of those kind of pitfalls, right, that are typical.
The other interesting statistic that I found out recently was these successful entrepreneurs are actually successful after second or third startup.
Interesting.
Because I know from my experience, 3 Avenues is my second, not startup, I would just say small business more than anything. Because the first one, I completely fucked up. I made a ton of fucking stupid ass mistakes. Because I was young, naive. I was 22 years old, and like but the thing is, going into this agency now, I will not make those same mistakes again, right? So that's an interesting point.
I've been there too, right? Like when I first started, when I first moved to Toronto, like my believe it or not, my first job out of university, I moved to Toronto. I was a consultant. I was helping a not-for-profit work with their donor base within a database system, and so on. And so, so that kind of was the springboard to kind of do my own kind of thing. But for me, the biggest lesson that I learned when I was early 20s was I couldn't figure out how to level up. I could keep myself busy. I could be, and I did very well. I was able to kind of buy a home. I was able to buy treat myself to a nice car and so on. But I couldn't figure out how to level up, and I didn't have the resources. I didn't have a circle, my inner circle, or I didn't have a group of advisors that I could lean on to help me. But and so eventually it kind of died away, and I continued to do a few little side gigs. But for me, that was a huge lesson to be able to say, hey, you got to kind of find people that you can lean on and rely on to be able to provide you with the right advice, not just to kind of feed your ego, but to give you the harsh realities in that feedback that an entrepreneur needs to be able to grow out a business.
So let me ask you this then, because I know I've struggled with trying to find the right people to help me level up. Fortunately, I've met some good people along the way to help me get to where I am today, including yourself. But how would you tell someone who's struggling with that kind of thing? Because let's say, for example, I feel a big problem right now is that when founders are looking for, advisors, looking for like a board of directors, whatever it may be, they have a natural tendency to go to people who work with like big fucking names. So like, let's say, for example, let's say you drop names like Microsoft and Apple, and you worked with all these fucking big names, but let's say you've really done nothing for them. Like how do you get beyond that? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first off, you got to be comfortable, right? You have to have there has to be this level of connection because it's a to be an entrepreneur to really have the passion to grow out a business. That's not a 9 to 5 gig,
Yeah.
right? It's all consuming. It's a lifestyle that you're trying to lead, and so you have to find people that you connect with.
Yeah.
If there isn't that kind of connection and the chemistry or something that kind of brings the people together, it's very difficult. It becomes this that relationship isn't going to help you. And so for me, I always kind of and that's a natural thing. Like that's not something that you can codify. It's just do you connect with an individual? Do you like what they have to say? Maybe their interests. You have certain things in common about their interests or their aspirations. Probably more importantly. But then it is about talk. It's this referral network, right?
Yeah.
Like when you think about LinkedIn and so on, it is about finding people that you trust to kind of make recommendations on your behalf. And so, to me, I found a lot of success in being able to just ask the question. People are their tendency is this desire, this huge, strong desire to help. And so you just have to be again. You have to be to be brave enough to just ask for help, ask the question, and then it is about it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
The more people you talk to, the more conversations you have, the better able you are to kind of figure out the type of person that you need or the type of skill set that you need because they're going to kind of elicit reactions, ideas, and concepts from you. That's very exciting for somebody who's trying to build out a practice, right?
So just having a little bit more faith in humanity and just like asking a question out there.
I like to think so, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to accept that sometimes it just doesn't work, right? It's like dating,
Yeah.
right? It's like
surprisingly, there's a lot of correlation.
It is like I hate to say it's a numbers game when it comes to dating, but it is. You're looking for somebody that you feel this connection with because you want it to be. There has to be a level of collaboration there, and there has to be this kind of give and take in order for it to be effective. So it is about, hey, you got to try it, right? If you don't try it, you're not going to know what you're missing or what you need to be able to kind of help.
Yeah. So then, let me ask you this then. So, relationships, hands down, like you got to have that connection, you got to have that fit with your advisor or whatever it may be. But how do you get to a point where you can start? Like I know from my experience. Like I've been in that trap of trying to get advisors who worked at Microsoft and just drop that fucking name. But like I said before, haven't actually done any fucking thing there.
Yeah.
So then, how do you get to like? I know my biggest struggle is I'd rather work with someone who doesn't have that name. If they have that name, great.
Yeah.
But what I'm looking for is, but who's actually proven out that can take me from 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 mil and has done it themselves and has a good track record of whatever their client portfolio of getting there. That's the biggest thing for me. Like the fit, and this might be me as a person, like the fit for me doesn't really apply since I'm fairly introverted regardless. So then like to a new founder or to someone that you're gonna give advice to, like say a new founder or whatever it may be, would you tell them like, look, you got to figure out yourself? Is there like a self-realization kind of?
But I think you've already done that, right? If you've committed yourself to the lifestyle of building out a startup, that's a pretty big decision for everybody, right? And so if you're at a point where you've made that decision and now you've been able to prove that out in some way, whether it's through revenue or clients and so on, that's a decision upon itself, right? And so to me, that's kind of helps me understand. Okay, you have the wherewithal, you have the passion, the drive to be able to kind of, I would say, withstand the chaos and the craziness that comes with trying to scale out a business. So to me, that's kind of the table stakes. From that point, and I think this is where I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is really about so let me give you a stat first. There's 500,000 businesses in the U.S. that get started every year. 0.5% of those businesses get some level of funding. So that's a pretty minuscule amount of companies that get some level of funding to help kind of grow. And so the alternative for the vast majority is about, what are the other options that I have available? And so you've made the commitment, you've started a business, you're looking to grow, you now, like perhaps funding isn't the current option. And so you do need to find a way. And I believe that, there are rarely challenges that are insurmountable. And so for the challenge around scale, it truly is about finding the right people that kind of fit into your vision. Because if they don't fit your vision, if they're just chasing a dollar, they're not gonna serve your need. They're not gonna help you. They're just gonna be looking after their own kind of agenda.
They're being selfish.
And they are, right? And for me, you can't be selfish when you're looking to kind of support that startup. For me, my genuine interest in helping startups scale and grow is really that excitement to be able to truly see and look the founders in the eye and say, look, based on our decisions that we've made together, we've been able to realize 2x success, 3x success. That's huge, right? That's exciting. That's kind of what drives me in terms of my own passion, is to be able to say, hey, I helped these guys. I helped this company grow. I'm certainly not sitting here suggesting that I am this kind of, this expert in all of these things. But, for me, I'm relying on my own experience, my own kind of the decisions that I've made in the past.
And your own mistakes that you made in the past.
Exactly. Yeah. To inform, to provide options. And I think maybe that's the best way to describe it, is that I present options, probably a little bit more extended or different than perhaps the founders. But that gives you a different perspective. At the end of the day, it's up to the founders to make that decision of what direction they want to take the business. All I can do is make recommendations and make the suggestions and present those options. Mm-hmm. And to be able to support them through my own experience, right?
So then, with all this being said, if you were to offer just one big, fat piece of advice to a struggling million, 10 million, whatever the hell company revenue number it may be,
yeah.
One, like the founder or the co-founders of that company, if they want to scale at a fairly rapid pace, what would that big piece of advice be?
To me, it's all about sharpening your focus, right? Sharpen your focus. Identify the key things that are going to drive that scale, that growth, and commit yourself and maintain that level of discipline that you need to kind of hit those objectives. This is why this whole concept around OKRs is it's amazing, is that it forces you to think really deeply about, if you can only do 3 things over the course of the next quarter or the next year, what would those 3 things be? And then the decision-making process becomes very simple. Every decision should be based on, that you make as within your organization, should be based on, is it getting me closer to my objectives or is it not? Right? It's that simple. And sometimes it's a tough call to be able to say, hey, we know that that's a priority, but it's not our priority for this quarter or this year, and so on, right? We need to kind of maintain that discipline. For me, it's trusting that process. It's trusting that you've made the right decision to be able to identify what those key objectives are.
I think, and if I were to give a sub advice to what you just said, and something that I've learned through my experience is, check your fucking ego at the door.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know my ego has, and some people call me completely egomaniacal, but
really?
No way. But I know that I've gone to points in my life and in my business career where I've not checked my ego at the door, and I refuse to take advice from people that I know have the good reputation, just because I want to be able to struggle and make those mistakes myself. And I know that's going to take me decades to even get to where I want to be. So I need to get to a point, and I feel like I have, even talking with you and putting on camera and everything, is founders, if you have an ego, check your ego at the door, because you're going to get nowhere fast if you aren't open to taking advice from people that you respect and people that have actually done it in the past and are willing to give you advice to take you where you want to go. Stop being selfish. Check your ego. Just keep going on from there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the end of my conversation there, my interview there. Thanks again. Why don't you just tell the people what you have going on? Would you give us your little sales pitch? Now's your
sales
chance.
pitch. Okay, well, I just kind of relaunched or launched my own website to kind of really kind of support the startup kind of culture in that environment. Yasuda.ca. For me, I'm just having conversations, meeting with founders, and really kind of intrigued about all of these opportunities that people are kind of pursuing. So that's pretty cool. In terms of personally, and I think I mentioned this to you, Andrew. Next week, I'm going to be hanging out in a yurt. If you don't know what a yurt is, you got to Google it. I'm going to be roughing it, or I think they called it glamping. And so I'm going to be hanging out there for a couple of days, and then really, for those who kind of know me, I'm a bit of a sneakerhead, so I'm really looking forward to SneakerCon coming to Toronto in a couple of weeks. So that's kind of the highlights for me that's coming up over the next little bit. So
sweet. He's too humble. So in a nutshell, yasuda.ca. I'll put that in somewhere below here. Go check him out. He's truly the 3X guy. He fucking hates that nickname, but I fucking love it. He does have a really good track record on working with multiple different firms on getting them to the revenue that they need to be and the profit margins that they need to be. This is the only reason why I would ever talk to him. Like, you don't see anyone else that I really talk to. Let's be real. My circle is fairly tight knit and small. He's a very results oriented person. Check him out. Go to his website. Give him a ring, send him a LinkedIn message, do whatever fuck you want to do. Just talk to him at least, and just hear him out, right? It's worth the discussion. Cool. So thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Until next time, peace out.